Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate, and this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get people talking. It's a book club episode this week, and Laura's joining me to catch up over the books read recently by our book clubs. Today we're talking about Universality by Natasha Brown, the eagerly anticipated second novel from an author whose first, Assembly, was a huge success, both with the critics and with readers. In Universality, a viral long read seems to expose the corruption of wealth, but the circumstances around how the piece came to be written are ultimately more intriguing than the story itself. Written in a style markedly different from Brown's first book, it was recently longlisted for the 2025 Booker Prize. But what did Laura's book club think? Meanwhile, the podcast book club and I read her debut, Sparks of Bright Matter, by Irish author Leeanne O'Donnell. A tale of ambition, occult mystery, and mythic heritage, as a book stolen in Georgian London leads back to forgotten family truths in rural Ireland. Was it a hit or a miss? Keep listening to find out. We'll also be hearing from a book club who take a particular delight in writing in their books.
Sometimes I like reading what's happening in the margin more than I do with what's on the page.
That's all coming up here on the Book Club Review. Hi Laura.
Hi Kate. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. It's a short novel about a woman who's obsessed with aeroplanes. Obsessed isn't the right word. They're actually an object of sexual desire for her. That's a very unusual premise, and I wasn't sure if she could carry it off. But so far, I'm loving the writing, and I'm actually finding it totally convincing. Plus, I read the bits about planes out to my husband, who's not a reader. And I think it's quite possibly the first book we've ever enjoyed together.
It sounds good, but I thought you were supposed to be reading Booker books.
I am. I will.
I mean, so am I might add. I'm in a funny little reading, not rut, but I'm listening to an audiobook, which is 16 hours long. So I haven't actually held a book and read it in a very long time.
What audiobook are you reading?
I like that you say reading. I would have said, what audiobook are you listening to? I am reading or listening to A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the second in a series that he calls an Anna and Din mystery. I don't know if I've talked about these before, but they're essentially crime detective, Agatha Christie murder mysteries, but set in this very complex world. It's very hard to describe, but It's sort of fantasy, it's sort of sci-fi. It's hard to describe.
So intrigued, want to come back to those. Okay, all right, let's get to our subject under discussion, and that is universality. Before we dive into universality, let me just take a moment to tell you about a favourite product of mine. If you read a lot like me, you'll probably notice how hard your eyes are working, particularly last thing before bed. Having to stop reading because of eye strain can be incredibly frustrating. Serious readers, makers of fine lights, believe the problem often isn't your eyes getting older, but the poor quality light you're reading by. They developed lamps that are precision reading tools designed to bring the full, clear spectrum of natural daylight indoors. Like everyone else I know who has one, I could not imagine being without my Serious Readers lights. I have one for my desk and one beside my bed, and I'm aware of how much easier it is to read without my eyes getting tired, and I also love the way I feel they help me maintain steady focus. On the technical side, they use their trademark daylight wavelength technology to replicate the full clear spectrum of daylight. This makes words on the page appear sharper and with better contrast, reducing the feeling of strain. And they're recommended by over 500 opticians for that reason. Precision reading lamps are an investment, it's true, but Book Club Review listeners can get the brilliant special offer of £150 off any HD Essential reading light, plus free UK delivery. Go to seriousreaders.com/BCR and use the code BCR at checkout. That's Bravo Charlie Romeo. It's completely risk-free with a 30-day home trial. If you don't feel the difference, they'll collect it for free and fully refund you. So head to seriousreaders.com/BCR and use that code BCR at checkout for £150 off any HD Essential reading light. Right, now that we can all see more clearly, let's head on with the show. Universality, a novella of just 154 pages, and the second work to be published from British author Natasha Brown. She shot to fame with her debut, Assembly, published in 2021, which Brown wrote as the result of a development programme she was enrolled in called the London Writers' Awards. And if you're not familiar with Assembly, let's take a quick moment to catch you up before we turn to Universality. Brown describes it thus. It's set in the late 2010s, it spans just a couple of days, and it's about a black British woman who, on the cusp of success in her life, stops and reevaluates everything. At the time, Brown's day job was in the world of banking and finance. She would write early in the morning before work and do her editing on weekends. The manuscript she went on to produce was picked up by an agent and bought by a publisher for a six-figure sum. Assembly was a critical hit, making many a Best Books of the Year list and securing Brown's place as a new star in the British literary firmament. And so to Universality, published in March 2025 and just 154 pages long.
On a Yorkshire farm, a man is attacked. The incident is noteworthy as the weapon is revealed to have been a solid gold bar. A journalist out to make a name for herself sets out to uncover the truth surrounding the attack, connecting the dots between an amoral banker landlord, an iconoclastic columnist, and a radical anarchist movement. She solves the mystery, but her viral long-read exposé raises more questions than it answers. The audiobook is narrated by Norma Butikofer. Here's a clip in which the journalist interviews the owner of the farm, a wealthy stockbroker named Spencer. His estranged wife Claire forms the next piece in the puzzle, and the journalist interviews her at her countryside home.
He's garrulous, keen to detail the many ways his life has been turned into an absolute shit show. An overly indulgent, even selfish comment, perhaps. After all, since the pandemic swept across the globe in 2020, many people have suffered badly, losing their lives and loved ones. Spencer is alive and well. His loved ones are safe, though possibly not reciprocally loving at this moment. But Spencer has lost something significant: his status. Back in 2019, all the excessive fruits of late capitalism were his. He owned multiple homes, farming land, investments, and cars. He had a household staff, a pretty wife, plus a much younger girlfriend. As a high-powered stockbroker at a major investment bank, he enjoyed immense power, influence, and wealth. He had everything. Now, stripped of all that, he has become the man across from me, a grounded giant, cut off from his castle in the sky. Spencer's gold-thieving, beanstalk-chopping Jack is Jake from the farm, whom he suspects of running off with the gold. Of course he bloody took it with him, Spencer says, certain of his own version of events, despite having never met Jake. In fact, Spencer knows virtually nothing about the man he blames for his ruin. Spencer invited Jake to the farm as a favor to Lenny, a woman he'd met in his building. Her friend needed a place to quarantine for a few days, he says simply. Spencer doesn't know much about Lenny, either. She was one of the few who remained in their Kensington apartment block during the lockdown, a time when most residents retreated to secondary homes. Does he know her surname? No. Age? Mature. Her flat number? I couldn't say for certain. What did he actually know about this woman when he decided to hand her the keys to his farm? Well, he hesitates. I knew her pretty well, in a sense. Reluctantly, Spencer will admit to his philandering. He is separated from his wife, Claire, who remains in the family home, raising their 3-year-old daughter Rosie alone. Not exactly alone, he's keen to point out. They have the nanny 4 days a week, and it's not like Claire has a job.
How did your group come to choose it?
This is one of those rare book club books that I chose or suggested we read. I had bought myself a copy and I suggested it to the group. About half of us had read Assembly, and so we're interested to read Natasha Brown's next book. For the other half, she was an unknown entity, but they were intrigued.
What did they think of it?
It was a good one. I love book club dynamics, especially with a book club where I know everyone so very well. And we're also on Zoom, so everyone's face is out in front of you. And no set person ever goes first necessarily. But we honestly are genuinely curious to hear who liked it and who didn't. And in this case, Francis and Phil came in super positive. They thought it was fantastic. They thought it was really great. And then there was a bit of a pause. And I was like, yeah. The first thing to say for listeners is that this expose is almost a full third, the first third of the entire book. And it's written by a journalist. And I make that differentiation because she's a fictional journalist. So yes, of course, Natasha Brown is writing it. But Natasha Brown is putting on the mantle of mainstream journalist. And this expose is badly written and it's not that intriguing. And if it went viral, it's an indictment of what content goes viral nowadays. And so I personally was just like, it was really bold of her to lead with this because for 50 pages, I was like, oh gosh. And then I was like, I really hope that Natasha Brown's beautiful prose is going to follow this and be the saving grace. It did. She absolutely came in with a different tone, but it didn't feel like quite the same writer as Assembly. And I actually had to look at a few reviews to orient myself. And there they pick up on the fact that this is a satire. I always have a little bit of a hard time with satire. I genuinely need to be told it's a satire and be like, okay, so what does that mean? How am I supposed to react if it's a satire? I'm not supposed to take it too seriously or be too critical. I'm not sure. I wasn't alone in feeling that it wasn't perfect or great in the way that Phil was quite uncritical. Joe said it's a really big swing, but maybe it's a little underbaked.
Because she's taking on...
Assembly was all of British culture in a way.
Right. So Assembly was very nuanced and very rich, and it was very much about a particular point of view and the systemic class, race structure of British society that she was really undercutting in a very interesting way.
In a very subtle way.
Yeah. I'm about halfway through this myself, and to me, that's why this felt so different, was because a lot of that subtlety, it feels like that's not what she's going for here. It's the opposite. She's going for obvious. She's going for big.
Yeah. Alice commented, it's as subtle as a brick. And then she laughed and she said, or as subtle as a gold bar.
Because for any listeners not familiar with it, the design of this book is very striking, but it's a massive gold bar foiled so it literally shines on the cover.
It's a clever novel, and it's a good novel, for sure. I don't think it is a great novel. It's like a sophomore effort. She had her freshman novel, which just had total cut through, felt so confident, and she's taken a big, bold move. I love the fact that she has gone so big in many ways. You could imagine her publishers saying to her, and these digs are written into the book, but like you could imagine her publisher being like, write more about the Black British experience. And her being like, no thanks. I'm going to write about the British experience. I'm going to write about the media and media culture. And I'm going to write about the London ecosystem that fuels itself and the impact that the media have on public discourse and truth. And I do love all that. And in her, maybe not afterward, maybe at the end, maybe it's at the end of her acknowledgements, she says something like, I hope you had fun with this book. And we all agreed that actually it was only at the end that we almost felt equipped to start again at the beginning and consider it as a construct. Because the first third is this article, this terribly written article. And then there's 3 or 4 chunks that take you into a moment in time for the different quote unquote characters related to this piece. So you get to go to Edmonton in North London, right? North London? East?
Is it?
Oh, wow. Kate should know. I haven't lived in London for 5 years. We go to this dreadful dinner party that the journalist who wrote the piece has brought together her friends who are also in media, who are more successful than her, who are higher class. She's more working class. And she's trying to recreate some sort of magic of their friendship. And it is awful. Like, they are all awful human beings. The journalist doesn't really endear herself to you. And it did feel like a caricature of the moneyed literary classes. Alice said, I just can't imagine that these people were ever friends. And they go from low stakes conversation to big topics. Eugenics slips in there at some point. And then that piece closes. And then you move on to Spencer, the banker, and his experience. And of course, what's happening as you go through these different pieces is that Natasha Brown is giving you the reality that was ignored in the article in order to tell a convenient narrative that was like fuel this interest in public discourse. So I laughed and I was like, for me, the horrible banker was one of the most endearing characters. he's one of the only working class characters in here. And I feel like Natasha Brown does a great service for bankers because he comes out. Yeah, he's not a perfect guy. He's made good. He's supported his father and his brother's business through the financial crisis. And he's done his best to encourage diversity in banking. And it wasn't even maybe this is a spoiler. It's a bit of a spoiler. But the gold bar comes up. And then it moves on finally to Lenny, who's the spider at the middle of this web.
This is the older journalist who's really made a name for herself through saying the unsayable, supposedly. These quite right-wing political views that she's... Yeah, I feel like she'd fit well on one of those radio talk shows or...
I don't read the Daily Mail, but I kept thinking of Sarah Vine, Michael Gove's wife, ex-wife, as that kind of a provocative columnist without a huge amount of depth and just really trying to stoke ire and outrage across as many topics as she possibly could.
And she has made a name for herself, hasn't she, with this book, No Mo Woke, which is a sort of anti-wokeism. Can I confess, if you asked me what woke is or being woke, I would struggle to encapsulate that. It's not on the tip of my tongue. One element of this book is that it's talking about culture wars, right? In a way
the hypocrisy of culture wars. Like you say you would have a hard time defining it, but I think that's the point, is that the term is a lightning rod for outrage, right? And people can bring to it for or against whatever they want, potentially. And Lenny's narrative is that it's the white working class who are really the people suffering in the UK. Who is England for comes up as a theme. Again, it's not subtle in kind of the satire and the extreme. I should say, it doesn't even come across as extreme, does it? You're like, yeah, no, I can imagine. Generally, I could imagine this being in the public discourse. And even the sort of eugenics piece that crops up. I was like, oh God, I haven't come across this yet, but it feels like possibly just on the cusp of what's next for where the world's going. As I say, I got to the afterword and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm supposed to have fun reading this. It is supposed to be funny. I'm not supposed to take it as real life in some ways. It is a satire. And I think that if I went back and read it, I don't think my opinion would change. I think her ambition doesn't quite match what she delivered. But I still think it's a really exciting novel. And she's a super exciting novelist. And I will read everything she writes.
I listened to the audiobook and that is very enjoyable. It zips along. I actually was finding it quite fun. So maybe there's a lightness to it that comes across in the audio that isn't. Because I suppose it's what you're bringing to it, isn't it? If you're expecting it to be serious, because Assembly was quite serious, it's hard to adjust to this being not that. Whereas in the audio, that's slightly more spoon-fed to you. Yeah, I was zipping along on my bike and listening to it very happily the other day.
But you haven't finished it, so how are you
feeling
about it?
No, I haven't. I'm just finding it really intriguing. I'm like you. I struggle with satirical books. I'm looking forward to having my own book club discussion on it because I think some of the things that I am a bit reluctant to really get my head around and engage with, and I feel like that's me being a bit lazy, I would look forward to being challenged on those or someone else explaining it to me or whatever. I know that then I would come away from a discussion of this book, I'm sure, with a sharper understanding of these things, and that would be good. And also just feels like a good time. It's not long, 154 pages. She writes beautifully. I'm happy to be engaging with it and want to see what she has in store.
What will be interesting is to hear from your readers who are not in the UK, how they relate to it. I used to live in London, so I know it quite well. But the book club did ask me, they're like, does this still resonate with you? Do you still understand the motifs, the characters, the sort of like pastiche of London media? And I was like, oh, yeah, like absolutely. But that doesn't mean that someone less versed in that world wouldn't be further removed. Satire dates, doesn't it? And I guess the question is, does satire also not travel well? Do you have to have a certain core understanding of what's being satirized for it to resonate? You can report back.
Yeah, I think maybe you do. I'd also like to report back that Edmonton, when I Googled it, first of all, I found out it was in Alberta, Canada. I was like, no, not
obviously.
That one. But then I discovered that it's actually not far from your old neighbourhood of Walthamstow. It's sort of northwest of Walthamstow.
Yeah.
But it's also north of me, so really shame on me.
But that's the point. Kate is one of those One of the friends
Oh.
arriving in Edmonton because they're like,
See?
what the hell are we doing in Edmonton at a dinner party?
The idea of me even leaving the house these days to go to a dinner party is fairly remote.
And listen,
I don't feel like I'd be too
you
thoroughly
visited
lumped
me
in.
often in Walthamstow. You'll go anywhere if there's enough incentive.
We would normally recommend follow-ons at this point, but here, courtesy of the Faber TikTok account, is Natasha Brown herself with her list of related reading.
My Universality reading list would include probably The Counterlife by Philip Roth, the New York Times article Bad Art Friend, Herman Koch's The Dinner, George Gissing's Victorian 3-volume novel The New Grub Street, Scarlett Thomas's novel Our Tragic Universe, and finally Agatha Christie's The 13 Problems.
Laura, what would you say? Any particular follow-ons?
Oh, just if you haven't read Assembly, you really must. It is very good. It lives up to all the hype, all the critical acclaim. And it is such a riposte to a line that Natasha Brown brings into Universality, which is this idea that in publishing more diverse voices, you're getting watered down literature. Like, no, it's the opposite. Assembly is a phenomenal book. Even the comparisons to Mrs. Dalloway. You're like, yeah, cool. I agree.
I agree too. It's so good. Coming up, we meet a book club who delight in scribbling in their books. But first, let me take a moment to tell you about our Patreon community. Patreon is a handy platform that allows people to support the creators of shows that they love. You can listen via the app or in your own usual podcast player via the RSS link. And don't worry, I give you full instructions for how to set this up. You'll become part of the Book Club Review community, where you'll get ad-free episodes of the main show. You'll also get the Book Club Review Weekend, the extra show I make just for subscribers. A recent episode covered a book club away weekend in Paris and our favourite literary places we found there. And just out, Laura and I swap notes on Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. The thing I liked most about Catabasis is my sense of the mind of the person who wrote it. And that is a real delight. It's like meeting someone really incredible at a party and getting to hang out with them. And maybe the anecdotes they tell aren't that great, but you really enjoy being with them and you're going to tell your friends about it afterwards. And that's a bit how I feel about Catabasis. And welcome to Gloria's Tuga by Francesca Siegel.
I read an interview where she was running through her favorite books and her influences and so forth. And the book she would take to a desert island was Middlemarch. And actually, that is the book that has the most parallels. Not in terms of quality, this is not going to be a classic for the ages, but in terms of depicting a community of people, their interactions with each other, they're all interconnected, they're all stuck on this tiny, highly isolated tropical island, and they're all in each other's business. They're all on the side of good. There's no evil people here. And if you get into it, as I did, maybe because I was really on holiday and just blitzing it, you're very happy to spend time in this small community.
Subscribers also have full access to our chat groups where you'll be able to swap book recommendations with me and other book club review listeners. Right now, we're busy comparing notes on the Booker shortlist. And if you want to come and talk books with me in person, at the higher tier, you can join the monthly book club. We meet on the last Sunday of every month over Zoom, which I then make into a special catch-up episode for anyone who couldn't make the live discussion. This month, October 2025, we're getting into the spirit of Booker season with Audition by Katie Kitamura. Head over to patreon.com/the book club review for all the benefits and how to sign up. You'll find the link in the show notes. Now, are you someone who likes your books to be pristine, or are you someone who likes to write in the margins? Kristina Ambrosia is someone who wants us all to get comfortable with the idea of writing in our books. And she set up a very particular book club where people are encouraged to do just that. She joined me over Zoom to tell me more about it.
I host a bunch of different creativity retreats. And the first time we met, we were reading the book Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. And so I had a bunch of activities planned around honoring those tiny beautiful things in our lives. And we used that as a kickoff to start Graffiti Book Club, which then was open to anyone who wanted to come. We meet once a month. I told people, come prepared with whatever book you want. But as you're reading through it, go ahead and graffiti up the pages, write in the margins, doodle, scribble, write diary entries, like I don't care. And then we all got together that next month and everyone gave a 2 or 3 minute synopsis of what their book was about. We went around the circle And everyone gets a number. We put them in a hat and we draw, and whoever gets number 1 gets to then go home with whoever book they want. And so then they write their name, the date, and they graffiti it up. I'm excited to see what the other women show up with and the creativity and how they express themes in the book.
How many people are in the book club?
So right now there's about 8 that come regularly.
So in the book club, every member is reading every book and the books are being passed around. And at the end of 8 months, everyone has read every book.
Correct. But we also believe in breaking rules. So if there are times that women come that they're like, I'm not into any of these books. And so we also have a crate with other books that are in it, just if nothing's suiting your fancy, that's kind of making its way around the circle.
And with the layers of writing that are building up in the books, I imagine that creates something that must be very meaningful at the end. Are you enjoying that process of these books accumulating these different thoughts and memories?
I love it. In fact, sometimes I like reading what's happening in the margin more than I do with what's on the page. People get really vulnerable on the sides of those pages, and I think it feels safe in some ways because they're providing commentary on another person's story, but you also get to see how they're relating and resonating with that story, which oftentimes is deeply personal.
And at the end, what do you do with the books? I guess they go back to their original owners, do they?
Yeah, so at the end, everyone theoretically, but because we haven't done a full rotation, would end up with their books. I'm actually really excited about that. I think I'll want to reread my book I came in with, because it was one that I loved originally, and then go through and almost read it like I'm reading a diary or a journal. It's interesting. I love that you bring that up because I'm someone who never reads a book twice. I'll dog ear a lot of sections and revisit some pages of some of my most beloved books, but I'm not really someone who ever reads a book twice just because there's so many books that I want to read. But doing it this way, I'm looking forward to reading that book again because I think I'm getting a new version of the book in some ways.
Yeah, I love that idea. And are you someone, you're clearly very comfortable, as you say, writing in books. I will write in a book, but I'm often not quite sure what to write. And I see posts sometimes on Instagram where, people have written all these amazing things in their books. And that's not really me. But do you have any suggestions for people to get comfortable with the idea of writing in their books and how to get the most out of that as a process?
I think it's really about creating a safe space with the other people in the group. I think it's more about the atmosphere you create, that there's no wrong way to do this. And something as simple as an exclamation mark is graffiti. Yeah. You are changing the altered form, and you can just think of yourself as like a minimalist graffitier. I don't even know if that's a word. And then some people have really taken it a step further and created these beautiful images. And if someone wanted to come and didn't feel comfortable, writing in their book, it's the kind of group that we would say, all right, let's do Post-it notes. So we would make it work and figure it out.
What a lovely idea. I sort of feel like I couldn't be surprised by any book club format, but then you came along and I was like, oh, wow, this is really never thought of doing a book club this way, but I love the idea of it. Have you made any discoveries? Obviously, you've got your books that you've had circulating around, but have you discovered any books through this process that you've really loved?
The Women by Kristina Ambrosia. I kept hearing different women mentioning it in the group, and I thought I like historical fiction. So I picked that up, and that has seemed to, of the women who've read it, been a fan favorite. Another one that I loved was Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma. To your question about types of books, it's more almost a cultural critique. She talks about what we do with the work of monstrous men and poses some really great questions about, can we separate the art from the artist? Should we separate the art from the artist? Is one level of genius, do we kind of excuse monstrous behavior more? And it was just brilliant. The writing was so very academic in places, but also accessible, engaging, funny. And so I recommend that if you're looking for something different.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Book club review listeners know that's one of my favorites. And what I find really interesting about that book is how I keep wanting to turn back to it. It hasn't stopped being relevant, has it? The question comes up again and again. And often there are other books which touch on it. And I want to go back to Claire Diderot because I felt like she really hashed the question out in a very satisfying way, I thought. Have you had any books going around that people really haven't liked? Has there been anything really divisive that's been going around?
There was very strong feelings about the book All Fours, Have you read that?
Yeah, the Miranda July. Yes, interesting.
Yeah.
Very.
So
I can imagine that being divisive.
yeah, I actually think that was the book I started with. And my personal reaction to that, I didn't know how I felt about it, honestly. I couldn't decide if I loved it, if I hated it. I was uncomfortable in places. So it was funny when I gave my synopsis, I was just basically was honest. I said, I have no idea how I feel about this book. I'm glad I read it, but I don't know. I finished feeling very unsettled, I guess, and not knowing how I felt. And so it was funny because my sister is in the book club and she ended up with it. And she sends me a picture of her graffiti in the page and it just says, I hate this, I'm stopping reading. And that's how she brought it to the next book club. And I'm like, well, that is a strong feeling. And so in some ways, I think other women in the book, because she had a negative reaction, it sparked intrigue, right? And curiosity. So that has been one that definitely people have felt very strongly about.
And outside of the book club, what are you reading currently?
I'm reading Just Kids, the memoir of Patti Smith. And her coming of age and coming up as an artist and counterculture New York City in the 60s and 70s and her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe. And it's funny because I'm not a huge pop culture person, so I actually had to even look up who Patti Smith was. And as soon as I found out it was kind of about art and creative devotion and counterculture and bohemianism, that all is super attractive to me. So I'm gobbling it up, even though I had to look up certain people in it.
Yeah, we did Just Kids for book club years and years and years ago, and I absolutely adored it. And like you, I didn't really know anything about Patti Smith, but there's something about this sense of creative rituals and her way to kind of mark these moments in time in these wonderful creative ways that it feels very empowering when you read it, because you feel like she's really inspiring you to do something in that way yourself. So I think it is a very creatively inspiring book. That it's been so fun hearing about your book club. I'm very inspired by this idea. I hope that listeners, people may be wondering what might be a good format to try for a book club, or even just having one session where you all pass around a book and write different things in it, I think is really lovely.
Yeah, and you could do it on a smaller scale. I do workshops where I do a pass the notebook where you're all writing on one prompt, or you could get an essay or something and do it as part of your book club just for one session, and that could be really fun as a way to modify it. We do have a Facebook page where anyone can get ideas, like if they want to start this in their own community of what we're doing. We bedazzled our book covers last session, so that was super fun.
Bedazzled your book covers? What does that mean?
So for this one, we both bought our book to trade, but then we picked a book that we love and we did diamond art all over the covers. It was a book from our personal collection that we then got to keep.
Well, I love the idea. I love the way that you've found of incorporating all this creative energy into the book club and the book discussions. Thank you so much for telling us about it.
It was lovely chatting with you. I can't wait to continue to listen and see what you're reading next.
Some brilliant ideas there for anyone wanting to creatively mix it up with their book club. I've read that Virginia Woolf was not a fan of annotations in books. Resenting the various opinions she felt forced to encounter in a marked-up volume, she developed a system of reading notebooks so as not to have to write in her books. 84 Charing Cross Road author Helen Hanff felt differently. I love inscriptions on flyleaves and notes in margins, she wrote. I like the comradely sense of turning pages someone else turned and reading passages someone long ago has called attention to. Whatever approach you choose, the key, it seems to me, is that your annotations reflect you, your curiosity and your engagement with the text, a dialogue that can anchor thoughts in your memory long after the final page is turned. And speaking of critical engagement with texts, the podcast Book Club and I read Sparks of Bright Matter by Leeanne O'Donnell. But what did we think of it? Sparks of Bright Matter is a historical tale based on a true-life individual called Peter Wolf, thought to be the last true practitioner of alchemy. The narrative takes place between 18th century London and Ireland and incorporates a mystical book, a cat-and-mouse chase, and themes of love and desire. Evie Woods, author of The Last Bookshop, called it thrilling and intoxicating, a dazzling debut. But did Sparks of Bright Matter make for a good book club read? The audiobook is read by Jerry O'Brien and published by Eru. Here's a clip, in which Mal Burkis, the young apprentice of eccentric scientist Peter Wolf, discovers he has made a fateful mistake.
When he enters Peter Wolf's rooms, Mal finds him alone and standing so still that he almost fails to spot him. Wolf is standing by the bookcase, a large, bright piece of quartz in one hand, and an open book in the other. The tall, thin form is perfectly motionless. That Peter Wolf should be standing still and intent, his body alone present, while his mind wanders far away, is not, in fact, unusual. But today Mal knows that something is amiss. It is not quite that he can smell it, some shift in the atmosphere of the room. It is that his intuition is as slight and unsettling as a scent half-remembered. He moves cautiously into the room, his head instinctively dipped, his feet moving quietly, looking about for some clue. And as he moves through the grey light admitted by the first window in the long room, his heart seizes in his chest. It is clear to him that the furnace at the back of the room, the furnace he has privately named Old Smoky, has gone out. How he knows this for certain, at this distance, with the door of the furnace shut fast, he cannot say, but he perceives a stillness, a dullness about the object, that is the very opposite of fire. He does not question this perception, has not the sophistication to think that perhaps his mind is shaping its very worst fear, but he does know that he must traverse the room and establish beyond doubt that there is no longer a fire in the belly of Old Smoky. That he must do this without his master's knowledge is evident. It is possible that, if he moves slowly enough, Wolf, who has not even turned his head, will not notice him passing at the far side of the room. When he has felt with his own fingers the cool touch of a dormant furnace, when he has seen for himself the dark, lifeless embers on Old Smoky's grate, then Mal knows he must run as fast as his legs will carry him.
So we've got Peter Wolf, we've got a character called Suki, who's a sex worker who steals this book. The book is a sort of central kind of MacGuffin, is it, that everything revolves around. It's called the Mutus Liber. It was a real book that was made in tiny quantities. I think there were 24 copies of it that they believe were printed, of which 12 copies are now conserved in libraries today. So this book is something that was known to be important and circulated at this time in the 18th century, but it's quite a mysterious book because it had all these images that seemed to refer to some kind of alchemical process, or you could certainly read that into it, but there's no text. So it was really not clear what it was about. And as a result, it held a very powerful fascination for a lot of people. Peter encounters this Suki character on the streets of London, and they have this tryst, could you call it? Not in any way romantic, very pragmatic, because that's how Suki earns her living. But she also spies this book, and because Peter is quite naive and a bit hapless, very easily she steals it off him. And she then finds that the book is exerting a powerful pull on her. Once she has it, she doesn't want to let it go. But she can't really keep it. It's incredibly valuable. Even she knows that. And people are hunting for this book. This book is wanted. It's somehow incredibly important, and dangerous men have been sent to recover it and are circling closer to Peter's master and then Peter himself. And so he is on the run.
I'm hoping you're going to say it's good, because this book, 18th century, love it. Historical thriller, love it. Book-related thriller, love it. Is it any good?
When you look it up, you find this quote from the Irish Times review. Think Hilary Mantel, Neil Gaiman, Susanna Clarke crossed with Liam O'Flaherty, Lady Gregory, W.B. Yeats, and the Celtic Revival, all expertly blended into a cracking page-turner that's as exquisitely deep, beautiful, and metaphysical as it is fast-paced and brilliantly plotted. So when we do book club, we plan in 3-month blocks, and at the beginning I post a suggestions box and everyone puts in their suggestions for the books. And then I make that into a list that people can vote on. And that was the quote I put by Sparks of Bright Matter. And so unsurprisingly, it did quite well in the vote, because you read that, you're like, whoa, yes, I want to read that. That sounds incredible. Did it live up to that description? It's a debut novel. I think that's the thing really overall that it came down to, because there was so much in there. It was vivid. The sense of place was amazing. It was very atmospheric. We all, I think, really enjoyed the way that she had taken these real things that existed. So the Mutus Liber real book. Peter de Wolf was a real individual who was known to be the last serious practitioner of alchemy. And it's at an interesting point where the Enlightenment and that scientific thinking and mindset is taking over from the more mystical, spiritual beliefs of previous ages, right? So there is this real sense of possibility and change. And she does explore that rather beautifully through this network of characters. I think the feeling overall for where it was falling down is that there are so many interesting threads, but that there wasn't enough of a through line really connecting this story up. And so, as one of the book clubbers, Charlotte, said, reading it was like being led down a series of blind alleys. Nicola said the writing felt like it was serving a plot, but the plot wasn't really there. So while you might be enjoying the writing and maybe enjoying the characters, there was just something a bit disconnected about all of it.
Do you think it's a good summer reading book? It feels like maybe a right time and place read, that you could really enjoy it if you were in the right time and place.
It's tricky because reading it, I was more conscious of the things I found frustrating about it. But the more I thought about it afterwards, and the conversation was so enjoyable, right? The discussion was so fun. I don't know, I kept seeing more and more in it, and I was certainly glad to have read it. It was a fun one to have flagged up, and I would recommend anyone who's feeling like, oh, this does sound up my street, do give it a try. I would absolutely say it's worth trying, because there is a lot in there to like. There's a whole other thread which is set in Ireland, West Cork, where this character Peter was originally born and grew up before moving to London. And that was also very atmospheric, and there was much more of the sense of the spiritual, mystical force of Ireland, and in particular the natural world. There's this mountain range there which have been mined for copper. And there was almost this sense of the land being embodied and pillaged for minerals and resources that kind of connected with what Peter was doing with the alchemy and the idea that everyone was desperate for this source of inexhaustible wealth, right? If you could figure out how to turn lead into gold, you'd have everything you could ever possibly need. And then the Philosopher's Stone, this is the other idea about eternal life and the promise of all these things. There were some interesting ideas there going on, but they felt quite disconnected, these two strands. And the character we were all really interested in Ireland was this almost like outcast woman of the village, Bridie, who was someone who didn't really fit into this very close-knit community and had this very strong connection to magic and the forces of nature. She was exiled and ends up living alone and continuing to live a long life. But we were fascinated by her. Like, we all wanted to know more about Bridie. And I could have read a whole book about Bridie. And I found it quite frustrating when we had to go and read about Peter. Because the other problem with Peter was that he wasn't really a very attractive character. He wasn't very nice. At the beginning of the book, he does something really terrible. Almost in the first few pages, he commits this terrible act. And he's not really apologetic about it. And I didn't feel like he ever really redeemed himself from that. And so as a result, I never really cared about him that much or what happened to him, which also felt like a bit of a flaw. Loved the fact that she connected her story to this real life individual. But I thought, if you're going to take a real life person and make up all this stuff, why not make them someone that you actually can root for and get behind? And he wasn't that.
I think it sounds like good fun. And in some ways, a good book club book.
It was a really good discussion book. I think I should leave the last word to Helene, who originally flagged it up for us and really championed it. She had read it twice. She really loved it. And I think we were all, as I say, pleased to have encountered it. And when I looked up the author, Leeanne O'Donnell, And I found out more about her. She's fascinating and really great. She's a documentary maker. She's a podcaster, podcasting about Irish myths and legends. She's a writer. She's also a psychotherapist. She's a mother of young children. I got the sense that most of this novel was written at a kitchen table. And I got this wonderful line I wrote down about finding space in the middle of everything. She was talking about Virginia Woolf's Room of Your Own and how, yes, that idea of a space is important, but it's not always possible to go off and find a room of your own. And if you can't do that, you have to somehow find space in the middle of everything that's happening around you. And I love that. That really resonated with me. So the more I found about her, the more I wanted to know. And then when I reflected on the book through the lens of knowing a bit more about this incredibly interesting woman who'd written it, then I found much more that I really liked in it. So it was a really interesting one. I'd say even now, in the process of telling you about it, my feelings towards it are changing. So I think, yeah, if people are interested, definitely give it a try.
I think I'll pick it up. Feels like a good library book too.
So you gave us a little teaser about what you're reading currently. And have you got anything else on your bedside table?
This is actually the problem, is I have many books on my bedside table. I have Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, which I've heard mixed things about, I think from both you and Phil and others. I have All Fours.
The Miranda July. Have you not read that yet?
No.
Oh, I can't wait to find out what you think of that.
And there's a few more that are skipping my brain, but it's always, I find TBR piles really hard. I don't like to have too many books waiting for me because I might not be in the right mood for that book at that moment, but I feel guilty because they're there and they need to be read.
That's why I find the first chapter read is a good policy, because it somehow seems to help with that feeling. When you've read the first chapter. Yeah. They're turned from strangers into friends. And that's they're there waiting for you. They're like people queued up outside a party.
They were also loaned to me. So I feel like I'm going to have to read them at some point because they were loaned to me by a friend and she's going to want them back and I'm going to have read them. Did I mention Carly Fortune on our Murderbot episode?
No.
Carly Fortune is the Canadian equivalent of Emily Henry and seems to be just as successful because, yes, she was on the bestseller chart at the airport when I was flying down to Palm Springs. But when I was flying out of Palm Springs, they only have 10 books on display, and she was there too. And she writes these romantic comedies or just romances, nothing too pulpy, but lots of sexual tension, some sex. But they're Canadian, and so I just quite like them. One, because they resonate with my life experiences and nationality. And quite a few of them are set in this very bougie area north of Toronto called Muskoka. Cottage country. There's many lakes across Ontario, and it's actually feasible to have a cottage on a lake because there's just so many, and it's such a big province. But Muskoka has, I think, 3 big main lakes, and so people go there. Basically, 50 years ago, your average Torontonian could probably have a cottage there. Now, there's some huge palatial mansions. But you go for the summer, and you have a boat, and by boat, you go to the local town, and you visit your friends all around the lake. And I joined this lifestyle for 3 weeks when I was 13 because I had family friends who took me to be a nanny for their little kids. And they had a family cottage. All of which is to say, I read 2 of those on my holiday and I was only gone for 4 days. And you probably wouldn't like them, Kate. But they were a very nice guilty pleasure.
They sound fun. My literary highbrow credentials are burnished at the minute because I've been reading Michelle de Kretzer's Theory and Practice, which won Australia's Stella Prize. I'm always interested in the Stella Prize. It's their equivalent of the Women's Prize. Although I almost feel, I think the Women's Prize here in the UK has evolved quite a lot over recent years. The Stella Prize feels slightly less accessible, slightly more highbrow, but slightly more literary, maybe. Maybe it's just that. It's perhaps just a vibe. I could be completely wrong. I need some Australians to tell me. When I watched Michelle de Kretzer's winning speech, I found her to be quite serious. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, this sounds like it's going to be quite hard going. But a couple of the Patreons had mentioned that they'd read it and that they had enjoyed it. And I was really intrigued. And idly in the bookshop, I picked it up. I started reading it and it just felt like exactly what I want to read. I have been enjoying it. The writing is beautiful, but in this way that it's almost irrelevant. It's not about how beautiful the writing is. And it's strange because it's not really obviously about anything except for this woman who feels very autobiographical, coming to terms with the fact that Virginia Woolf, who is a writer who has meant a lot to this woman who is a writer, was basically racist, as is revealed quite early on in her diaries, which the author is reading, where she refers to this shriveled brown individual from the colonies And Michelle de Kretzer, who's born in Sri Lanka, and her family migrated to Australia. And so it's almost that Claire Dider and Monsters idea about how do we deal with our feelings where it's an artist who we like and admire and whose work is incredibly meaningful to us. And as women writers, it feels like Virginia Woolf is such a touchstone. And yet we know them to have opinions or values that are abhorrent to us in some way, and the interrogation of that. And it's just very lightly done. It's beautifully done. There's a quote on the inside cover from Sigrid Nunez, thrillingly original. And that feels like a very nice pairing there as well. Sigrid Nunez is also an author, I think, who does this sort of thing really well. So I've been really enjoying that. I would recommend it. It's been great.
That sounds great.
Love chatting books with you, as ever. So nice to talk book club books. My favourite subject.
I know. It was nice to give voice to the amazing discussion as well that my book club always has.
That's nearly it for this episode. You'll find all the books mentioned listed in the show notes. A couple of things on the parish notice board. If you haven't seen the documentary The Librarians yet, please seek it out. It's an incredible film about the wave of book bannings across the US and the librarians who have found themselves on the front line of the culture wars. It's a beautifully made film directed by Kim A. Snyder and exec produced by Sarah Jessica Parker, and moved me to tears more than once. Despite the depressing context, it's also a film with an incredible message of hope as these brave people fight to make sure that books are freely available to everyone. I loved it. Don't forget, you can sign up for ad-free episodes, the Book Club Review Weekend, our chat groups, read-alongs, and podcast book club over on Patreon. You'll find the link in the show notes. And a reminder about that offer code for any Serious Readers HD Essential Reading Light. Head to seriousreaders.com/BCR and use the code BCR at checkout. You'll find the link in the show notes. Over at thebookclubreview.co.uk, you'll find the full archive of over 175 other episodes. I love all of them equally, so if you haven't explored the backlist, have a look and see what's there. To keep up with the pod between episodes, you'll find me on Instagram at Book Club Review Podcast, or drop me a line anytime at thebookclubreview@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, one completely free way to support me is to share it. Tell your friends, post about it online. You can leave a review on your podcast platform or share the episode on your social media channels. Taking a moment to do this might not seem like much, but it makes a huge difference in helping the show reach new listeners, and I'm incredibly grateful to people who help in this way. Next up, Laura and I are back, swapping notes on our recent reads, including Edward Chisholm's page-turning memoir of life as a waiter in Paris. We're also discussing You Are Here, the latest from one-day author David Nichols, Mouthing by Orla Mackey, a literary Irish debut that got the podcast book club talking, and Ray Bradbury's all-too-prescient Fahrenheit 451. But for now, thanks for listening, and until next time, I wish you happy reading.